The human mind is a complex machine, quietly shaping how we feel, act, and respond to the world around us. Even when we think we understand our own behaviour, much of what drives us comes from hidden processes deep inside the brain. From the way we interpret emotions to the choices we make each day, the mind is constantly influencing us in ways we barely notice. These psychological facts reveal just how intricate and powerful the human brain truly is. 1. Your brain protects you from emotional overload by numbing feelings. When the brain senses that emotions are becoming too intense, it may temporarily shut down certain emotional responses as a form of protection. This numbing effect is the mind's way of preventing panic or emotional collapse. People often describe feeling detached or blank during extremely stressful moments because the brain is lowering emotional intensity to preserve stability. While it may feel confusing, this response is actually a survival mechanism. 2. People often misinterpret silence because the brain dislikes uncertainty. When someone goes quiet, the brain immediately starts trying to explain the silence. It searches for clues, fills gaps, and often assumes negative meaning simply because uncertainty feels threatening. This is why silence during text messages, conversations, or disagreements can feel so uncomfortable. The mind prefers a bad answer over no answer at all. 3. The brain reacts more strongly to potential losses than to gains. This phenomenon, called loss aversion, means your brain feels the pain of losing something much more intensely than the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. This is why people stress more about losing money, relationships, or opportunities than they celebrate when they gain them. The brain evolved this way to protect our ancestors from danger and resource scarcity. Modern life still triggers the same fear response. 4. You make more impulsive decisions when you're hungry or stressed. Hunger lowers glucose levels, reducing the brain's ability to regulate emotions and think logically. Under stress, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for self-control, becomes weaker, while the emotional centers of the brain become stronger. This combination leads to quick, emotion-driven decisions that may not be in your best interest. It's why people buy unnecessary things, lash out, or make risky choices when stressed or hungry. 5. The brain forms stronger memories when physical movement is involved. Walking, gesturing, or interacting with objects while learning helps create deeper neural connections. This is because movement increases blood flow to the brain and activates regions that sharpen memory. Students often recall information better when they study while walking or explaining concepts out loud with gestures. The mind remembers action more easily than stillness. 6. People judge honesty more by facial expression than by words. The brain evolved to read faces long before language existed, so it gives more importance to micro-expressions than verbal communication. When someone's face and words don't match, the brain trusts the face. Even slight tension around the mouth or eyes can signal discomfort or dishonesty. This is why people often say, "I just felt something was off," even when the person spoke flawlessly. 7. Your brain prefers predictable routines to reduce stress. Even if you enjoy excitement or change, your mind still relies on predictable habits to stay grounded. Familiar routines lower cortisol levels and create a sense of safety. When routines break, anxiety increases because the brain must suddenly process new information. This is why sudden life changes, even positive ones, can feel overwhelming at first. 8. People remember negative comments much longer than positive ones. A single harsh remark can linger in your mind for days because negativity activates deeper emotional processing. Positive comments fade faster, as they pose no threat. This imbalance was vital for ancient survival, but today it leads to overthinking and emotional sensitivity. It takes several positive experiences to outweigh one negative one. 9. Your brain creates emotional associations with songs, smells, and places. Whenever you feel a strong emotion while experiencing music, scents, or environments, your brain links the two together. Later, encountering the same stimulus triggers the old emotion instantly, even years later. This is why a single song or smell can pull you back to a moment you haven't thought about in ages. The brain stores emotions more deeply than facts. 10. People tend to mimic the emotional energy of whoever they're speaking to. Humans naturally mirror the tone, posture, and emotional state of others. If someone is tense, your body may unconsciously tighten. If someone is warm and relaxed, your breathing might slow. This emotional synchronization helped early humans build relationships and avoid conflict. Today, it still shapes social interactions powerfully. 11. Your brain seeks out information that confirms your existing beliefs. This is known as confirmation bias. The brain prefers information that feels familiar or aligns with what you already believe, even if that belief is flawed. This makes it harder to accept new perspectives or admit mistakes. It protects your identity, but can also limit growth. 12. People often mistake distraction for relaxation. Scrolling, watching videos, or playing games may feel restful, but they keep the brain stimulated and prevent true recovery. Real relaxation requires low stimulation, like quiet moments, deep breathing, or stillness. This is why you can spend hours online, yet still feel mentally tired afterward. The brain needs silence to recharge. 13. The brain uses emotional pain to teach long-term lessons. Heartbreak, betrayal, or humiliation leave deep emotional marks because the brain wants to prevent similar pain in the future. Emotional wounds trigger memory systems more intensely than pleasant experiences. This is why you remember painful events vividly. The mind is using pain as a learning tool. 14. People reveal their true personality more easily through writing than speaking. Writing gives the brain time to organize thoughts without the pressure of immediate social response. Without eye contact or judgment, people feel more comfortable expressing vulnerability, dreams, or fears. This is why texts, letters, or journals often feel more honest than spoken conversations. 15. Your brain finds comfort in repetition because it signals safety. Hearing a familiar song, watching a favorite show, or repeating old habits calms the nervous system. Repetition tells the brain, this is predictable, this is safe. That's why people return to familiar experiences during stress. The brain seeks emotional stability through what it already knows. 16. People often project their insecurities onto others without realizing it. When someone feels insecure about a trait, behavior, or weakness, the brain sometimes shifts the discomfort outward by assuming others have that same flaw. This unconscious projection reduces internal stress by redirecting attention away from the real issue. For example, someone who fears being judged may accuse others of being overly critical, even when no criticism was intended. Projection is not intentional. It's the brain's attempt to protect the self-image from emotional pain. 17. Your brain automatically assigns emotional meaning to neutral events. Even when something has no real emotional value, the brain creates an interpretation based on your past experiences. If you grew up around conflict, silence may feel threatening. If you grew up with warmth, silence may feel peaceful. The brain uses memories as filters, shaping how you see the world in the present. This is why two people can experience the same moment but feel completely different emotions. 18. People are more likely to act confidently when they understand only the basics of something. This is related to the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people with limited knowledge feel more confident than experts. When someone knows only a little, the brain overestimates how much it actually understands. As knowledge deepens, confidence often drops because the person becomes aware of the complexity they didn't see before. The mind is more comfortable with simple understanding, than with deep uncertainty. 19. Your brain exaggerates future problems to prepare you for danger. When thinking about the future, the mind magnifies the worst possibilities, so you'll be ready to respond. This protective mechanism often turns into worry or anxiety, even when the threat is small or unlikely. The brain believes over-preparing is safer than under-preparing. While this helped early humans survive, modern life doesn't require constant threat response, making the reaction feel overwhelming. 20. People tend to remember the beginning and end of conversations better than the middle. This is called the serial position effect. The brain prioritizes first impressions because they shape expectations. It also remembers the ending clearly because closure matters for emotional processing. The middle often gets blurred or forgotten because the brain focuses more on transitions than continuous information. This makes the start and finish of conversations more important than most people realize. 21. The brain struggles to distinguish between physical and emotional pain. When someone experiences rejection, humiliation, or heartbreak, the same neural pathways activate as when they experience physical injury. This is why emotional wounds feel physically heavy or sharp. The brain treats social pain as a real threat to survival. This overlap explains why emotional healing takes so long. The brain treats it as a serious injury. 22. People often feel more motivated after receiving small rewards rather than big ones. Small, consistent rewards activate dopamine more effectively than large, infrequent ones. The mind prefers steady progress because it creates rhythm and momentum. Huge rewards create pressure, raising anxiety and fear of failure. The brain values consistency over intensity. 23. Your mind automatically filters out information that doesn't match your worldview. This selective perception helps the brain avoid overload, but it also limits growth. When something challenges your beliefs, the brain may ignore it or twist it so it fits your existing viewpoint. This happens so fast that you don't even notice it. Breaking this pattern requires conscious effort and humility. 24. People often confuse feeling tired with feeling uninspired. When the mind lacks emotional stimulation, it creates a sensation similar to fatigue. You might feel drained, unfocused, or slow, not because your body needs rest, but because your mind needs meaning or excitement. True fatigue improves with sleep. Emotional fatigue improves with purpose. The brain can't function well without motivation. 25. Your brain remembers emotionally incomplete moments the longest. When something ends abruptly, a relationship, conversation, or opportunity, the brain holds onto it because it never received closure. This lack of resolution forces the mind to revisit the memory repeatedly in an attempt to understand it. That's why unfinished emotional chapters linger far longer than moments that ended clearly. Closure allows the brain to file memories away. Without it, they stay open. 26. People often feel calmer after crying because the brain resets emotional pressure. Crying activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which lowers heart rate and relaxes the body. Emotional tears also release stress chemicals, reducing internal buildup. This is why crying often leads to clarity, even if the problem remains. The brain uses tears as a natural emotional reset button. 27. Your mind imagines worst-case scenarios to protect your self-esteem. When something feels uncertain, like waiting for a response, feedback, or outcome, the brain may create negative predictions. Strangely, this is a defensive move. If the bad thing happens, you've already prepared emotionally. If it doesn't, you feel relieved. This cycle can become addictive, leading to chronic overthinking. 28. People often mistake familiarity for safety, even when it's harmful. The brain values predictability because it reduces cognitive effort. This is why some people stay in unhealthy habits, friendships, or environments. Familiarity feels safer than change. The brain prefers the comfort of known patterns, even when they cause pain. Breaking familiar cycles requires conscious intervention. 29. Your brain listens more to your inner voice than to actual evidence. Self-talk shapes your perception of reality. If your inner voice is critical, the brain adjusts your self-image downward, no matter how much external success you have. If your inner voice is encouraging, the brain builds confidence even in uncertain situations. The mind treats internal dialogue as truth. 30. People often misread others' emotions because the brain prioritizes past experiences. If someone reminds you of a past person, in appearance, tone, or behavior, your brain may automatically assign them similar traits. This shortcut helps the brain save time, but can lead to misunderstandings. You're not always reacting to the person in front of you. Sometimes, you're reacting to a memory. The mind is a complex and powerful force that shapes how we see the world and interact with others. Our thoughts, behaviors, and decisions are often influenced by psychological processes that we aren't even aware of. By understanding how these processes work, we can gain greater insight into why we act the way we do. Let's explore some fascinating psychological facts that will give you a deeper understanding of the human mind. 1. The brain can process visual information in less than 1/10 of a second. The brain is an incredibly fast processor. When you look at something, your brain is able to analyze and interpret visual data almost instantaneously. In less than 100 milliseconds, 1/10 of a second, your brain begins to process the image, interpret shapes, colors, and even emotional cues from a face or scene. This rapid processing helps us react quickly to our environment, which was crucial for survival in the past. This ability to absorb and act on visual information so swiftly also explains why people can quickly pick out patterns or detect threats, even in unfamiliar situations. 2. People are more likely to act aggressively when they feel their status is threatened. Status and social standing are deeply ingrained in the brain's social circuits. When a person's status or sense of power is threatened, whether in a conversation, a workplace, or a social setting, the brain reacts with stress and a defensive response. Aggression often follows because the brain sees this as a threat to one's place in the social hierarchy. This is why people may become defensive or lash out when they feel disrespected or overlooked. The brain is primed to protect one's position in society, and if that position is threatened, the body responds with fight or flight instincts, often leading to aggressive behavior. 3. People are more likely to act out of character when they're in a large group. De-individuation is the psychological phenomenon where people in large groups tend to lose their sense of individual identity and self-restraint. In such environments, the brain is less concerned with personal accountability, which can lead to behavior that is out of character. The larger the group, the less an individual feels personally responsible for their actions. This is why crowds can sometimes act in ways that seem out of place or extreme. The anonymity provided by a group setting leads to a loss of inhibitions, and people may engage in risky or even aggressive behavior that they wouldn't consider on their own. 4. The brain is highly influenced by first impressions. The halo effect refers to the tendency to make broad assumptions about someone based on a single characteristic. When you meet someone for the first time, your brain will often form an overall judgment based on a single factor, such as their appearance or mannerisms. If someone is attractive, for example, you're more likely to assume they are also intelligent, kind, and capable, even if you have no other evidence to support these assumptions. First impressions are powerful because the brain is always seeking shortcuts to make sense of new information quickly. Once a first impression is formed, it is difficult for the brain to reconsider it, and this initial judgment can color how we see a person for a long time. 5. People remember emotional experiences more vividly than neutral ones. The brain prioritizes memories linked to strong emotions. When something happens that makes you feel particularly happy, sad, scared, or angry, the brain releases chemicals like dopamine and cortisol to solidify the memory, making it more vivid and easier to recall. This emotional imprint helps humans learn from experiences and avoid danger in the future. For example, traumatic events tend to stay in the memory longer because the brain treats them as high priority, potentially life-threatening experiences. On the other hand, everyday neutral events fade from memory because they don't trigger the same emotional response. 6. Your brain is more likely to believe something if it's repeated. The mere exposure effect explains why repetition makes things seem more truthful. The brain naturally assumes that something repeated over time must be accurate or trustworthy, even if it isn't. This is why advertising works so well. Repeated exposure to a brand or message can convince people to buy a product, even if they don't have any direct evidence of its quality. The more familiar something feels, the more the brain perceives it as reliable, even if it's based on little to no factual evidence. This is why constant exposure to misinformation can lead to its acceptance as truth. 7. People's behaviour changes when they feel anonymous. When people feel they are not being observed, whether in large crowds, online, or under the cover of anonymity, de-individuation occurs, and they tend to act less inhibited. The brain reacts differently when an individual is anonymous, removing the self-monitoring that typically regulates behaviour. This is why people sometimes engage in behaviours they wouldn't normally consider when they feel anonymous, such as aggressive actions, risky behaviour, or even online trolling. Without the fear of social consequences, the brain loses some of its ethical restraints, leading to actions driven more by emotion than reason. 8. The brain adapts more easily to negative information than positive. Humans are wired to prioritize negative information, a phenomenon known as negativity bias. This bias evolved as a survival mechanism to help our ancestors quickly detect and respond to potential threats in the environment. In today's world, this tendency can cause us to focus more on criticism, mistakes, or setbacks than on our successes or positive feedback. The brain processes negative information more deeply and with greater emotional intensity, which can make it harder to overcome bad experiences and easier to dwell on them. This is why negative comments often stick with us longer than positive ones. 9. Your brain works differently when you're sleep deprived. Sleep deprivation impacts cognitive performance significantly. When you don't get enough sleep, the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for higher cognitive functions like decision-making and impulse control, becomes less active. At the same time, the amygdala, which processes emotions like fear and stress, becomes more reactive. This shift in brain activity makes you more likely to make impulsive decisions, act on emotion, and struggle with concentration. The brain is essentially less capable of processing information clearly and calmly when you're tired, which is why decisions made when sleep deprived tend to be more reckless or emotional. 10. People tend to be more generous when they feel gratitude. Gratitude activates the brain's reward system, releasing dopamine and oxytocin, the feel-good chemicals. These chemicals promote positive social behaviours, making people more likely to help others when they feel grateful. Research has shown that when you express gratitude, it not only boosts your own happiness, but also encourages pro-social behaviour in those around you. People who feel thankful are more likely to engage in acts of kindness, such as volunteering or offering support to others, because gratitude enhances the brain's motivation to create positive interactions. 11. The brain doesn't differentiate between physical and emotional pain. Studies have shown that both physical and emotional pain activate the same areas of the brain, particularly the anterior cingulate cortex. This region is responsible for processing both types of pain, which is why the brain experiences emotional distress as physically painful. For example, social rejection or the loss of a loved one can feel as intensely painful as a physical injury. This connection between emotional and physical pain helps explain why emotional wounds can be just as debilitating as physical ones, affecting everything from mood to overall health. 12. People are more likely to act generously when they see others acting generously. This is an example of social contagion, the idea that emotions and behaviours spread like a virus within social groups. The brain tends to mirror the actions of others, particularly in group settings. When you see someone do something kind or generous, your brain releases oxytocin, encouraging similar behaviours in yourself. This is why acts of kindness often snowball. Generosity creates a positive feedback loop where others are inspired to act generously in return. Social contagion can be a powerful force for good, which is why movements of collective action or charity often gain momentum quickly. 13. People's choices are often influenced by subtle environmental cues. Our decisions are frequently influenced by priming, a psychological phenomenon where exposure to one stimulus affects the response to another, often without conscious awareness. For example, research has shown that people are more likely to donate to charity if they're first exposed to words related to kindness or generosity, even if those words are unrelated to the cause. The brain is highly responsive to these subtle cues, making us more likely to make decisions based on external environmental factors, even when we think we're making choices independently. 14. Your brain can adapt to higher levels of stress with time. While stress can be debilitating in the short term, the brain can adapt to chronic stress over time through a process known as allostasis. The brain recalibrates itself to cope with ongoing stress, which can improve its ability to manage pressure. However, constant high levels of stress can also lead to wear and tear on the body and brain, increasing the risk of mental health issues like anxiety, depression, and cognitive decline. The brain's ability to adapt can be beneficial in the short term, but over time, it's important to manage stress levels to avoid long-term harm. 15. People often act based on how they believe others perceive them. The looking glass self is a concept in social psychology that suggests people shape their self-concept based on how they believe others perceive them. The brain is highly attuned to social feedback, and this influences how we view ourselves. When we think others see us positively, our self-esteem rises, but when we believe others view us negatively, our self-esteem drops. This constant reflection can lead to significant changes in behaviour as we try to align our actions with the expectations and perceptions of those around us. 16. Your brain processes information faster than you realise. The brain is an incredibly efficient organ, processing information at speeds that exceed our conscious awareness. Neural impulses travel at speeds of up to 268 miles per hour, allowing the brain to absorb and respond to external stimuli almost instantaneously. For example, when you touch a hot surface, your brain has already signaled your muscles to pull away before you consciously realize the pain. This incredible processing speed helps the brain react quickly to danger and make split-second decisions. However, the brain's rapid processing also contributes to biases, as it often relies on automatic thinking rather than rational deliberation, especially in fast-moving or emotionally charged situations. 17. People are more likely to engage in risky behaviour when they're in groups. The presence of others can influence decision-making in profound ways. Social influence plays a huge role in behaviour, and the brain often makes decisions based on what others are doing, especially in uncertain situations. This phenomenon is known as group polarization, where individuals in groups tend to make more extreme decisions than they would on their own. Whether it's engaging in reckless behaviour, making impulsive decisions, or even embracing Extreme ideas, the brain's desire to conform and gain approval from others, often leads people to take risks they might avoid when alone. This is why risky behaviour like drinking, gambling, or thrill-seeking can escalate in group settings. 18. The human brain has a natural bias toward overestimating future happiness. The impact bias refers to the brain's tendency to overestimate how good or bad future events will make us feel. When we anticipate an event, whether it's a promotion, a vacation, or a new relationship, we imagine that the outcome will bring us a greater sense of happiness than it actually does. Once the event occurs, the brain tends to adapt to the new situation, and the happiness it brings often fades faster than expected. This is why even major achievements can sometimes feel less fulfilling once they're realized. The brain's tendency to overestimate emotional outcomes is driven by its need to predict and prepare for the future, but it often leads to disappointment when reality doesn't match the imagined scenario. 19. People are more likely to help others when they see others helping. Social proof is a powerful motivator for behaviour, especially in helping situations. The brain is more likely to engage in pro-social behaviour when it observes others doing the same. When you see someone helping a person in need, your brain releases dopamine, reinforcing the behaviour and making you more likely to act similarly. This is why volunteerism, charitable giving, and community-driven efforts often become contagious. Witnessing acts of kindness can inspire others to contribute. Social proof makes people feel more comfortable helping because it signals that the behaviour is accepted and valued in the community. 20. Your brain tends to prioritise bad news over good news. This is another manifestation of negativity bias, where the brain gives more weight to negative information than positive. Negative experiences, information, or events tend to have a greater psychological impact, and they're remembered more vividly. For example, after a positive meeting, one piece of negative feedback can overshadow the entire experience. The brain processes negative stimuli with more intensity because it is designed to prioritize threats to our survival. This bias helped our ancestors stay alert to dangers, but in today's world, it can lead to overthinking or rumination on negative events, making it harder to enjoy positive experiences. 21. Your brain is capable of changing even the smallest detail in your memories. The brain doesn't store memories like a video recorder. Instead, memories are reconstructed every time you recall them. This process is influenced by both the passage of time and new experiences. Each time you think about a past event, the brain pulls from your existing knowledge, beliefs, and emotions, which can lead to subtle, or not so subtle, alterations in the memory. This is why people often misremember details or distort past events, especially when they are influenced by suggestion or external factors. Our memories aren't as accurate as we think, and over time, the brain's natural reconstruction process can cause us to change the details without even realizing it. 22. People's decisions are often influenced by the way options are framed. This is known as the framing effect, where people make different choices depending on how options are presented, even if the underlying facts are the same. For example, people are more likely to choose a product when it's presented as 90% fat-free than when it's presented as 10% fat. The brain tends to focus on positive framing, even when the two pieces of information are functionally equivalent. This bias is used in marketing, advertising, and even politics to influence decisions. The way information is framed activates certain parts of the brain, which can shape our choices and lead us to prioritize certain options over others. 23. People are more likely to trust those who mirror their body language. The brain reads nonverbal cues to assess whether someone is trustworthy or similar to you. When a person mirrors your body language, whether it's crossing their legs in the same way, leaning forward when you do, or mimicking your gestures, it signals that they are empathetic and aligned with your emotional state. This is why people tend to feel more comfortable around those who subconsciously mirror their movements. Mirror neurons in the brain allow us to mimic others and feel their emotions as our own, creating a sense of connection and trust. This phenomenon is often used in social interactions to build rapport and establish relationships. 24. Your brain can get addicted to uncertainty. While we often think of addiction in terms of substances like alcohol or drugs, uncertainty can also become an addictive experience for the brain. The unknown creates a sense of excitement and anticipation, leading the brain to release dopamine in response to the unpredictability of outcomes. This is why people sometimes get caught in cycles of checking their phones, waiting for an exciting event to happen, or seeking out unpredictable situations like gambling. 25. Your brain can freeze when faced with overwhelming choices. When presented with a large number of choices, the brain becomes overwhelmed and can struggle to make a decision. This phenomenon, known as decision paralysis, occurs because the brain has to work harder to weigh the potential outcomes of each option. The more choices you have, the more time and energy the brain spends comparing them, which often leads to confusion or frustration. This is why many people end up procrastinating or choosing the easiest, most familiar option when faced with too many choices. Research has shown that simplifying choices can lead to better decision-making, as it reduces cognitive load and allows the brain to make faster, more confident decisions. 26. The brain can't distinguish between physical and emotional pain. When you experience emotional pain, such as heartbreak or social rejection, the brain processes it using the same regions that are activated when you feel physical pain. Studies have shown that rejection and emotional hurt activate the anterior cingulate cortex, which is the area of the brain responsible for processing both emotional and physical pain. This connection helps explain why emotional distress can feel just as intense and debilitating as physical injury. The brain doesn't see a clear boundary between emotional and physical suffering, which can make negative emotional experiences feel physically overwhelming. 27. People are more likely to take risks when they are in a group. When individuals are in a group setting, they are more likely to engage in risky behaviour than when they are alone. This happens due to diffusion of responsibility, where the individual feels less accountable for their actions because they're part of a collective. The brain perceives less personal responsibility and places more emphasis on the social rewards of fitting in with the group. In group settings, peer pressure, social validation, and a desire to conform often push people to take risks they might avoid in isolation. This explains why people may engage in dangerous or reckless behaviours, like driving fast, gambling, or experimenting with drugs, when in the presence of others. 28. Your brain is wired to pay more attention to negative stimuli. The negativity bias is a fundamental feature of the human brain. It refers to the tendency for people to pay more attention to, remember, and be influenced by negative experiences than positive ones. This bias is thought to have evolved to help early humans avoid danger. Negative experiences, such as a threat or bad news, are perceived as more urgent and need to be remembered to avoid future harm. In modern life, this bias means that people are more likely to dwell on criticism, stressful events or failures, and often struggle to fully appreciate positive events. Recognizing the negativity bias can help individuals shift focus to the good things in their lives, fostering better mental health and well-being. 29. People's moods can be influenced by the color of their environment. The color of the spaces around you can have a profound impact on your mood and behavior. Colors like red and yellow are associated with heightened energy, passion, and urgency, while blue and green are linked to calmness and relaxation. These color associations happen because different colors stimulate the brain in various ways, influencing hormones and emotional responses. For example, The colour blue can lower heart rates and reduce stress, which is why it's often used in bedrooms and hospitals. On the other hand, red increases heart rate and stimulates excitement, which is why it's often used in warning signs or in environments where alertness is required, like restaurants or gyms. 30. Your brain tends to generalize based on first impressions. When you meet someone for the first time, your brain quickly forms a judgment about them based on limited information. This is called the halo effect, where the brain tends to generalize a person's traits based on one positive characteristic. If someone is attractive, for instance, your brain might assume they're also kind, intelligent, or trustworthy, even if you have no proof to support those traits. First impressions are formed rapidly, and once they're established, the brain has a tendency to hold on to them, making it difficult to change those perceptions later on. This tendency can lead to unfair judgments and biases, both positive and negative. 31. People's memories can be shaped by the emotions they associate with an event. Emotions play a significant role in how the brain encodes memories. When you experience an event that evokes a strong emotional reaction, the brain releases hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, which help strengthen the memory. These memories are more vivid and easier to recall than those that are neutral or lack strong emotional connections. For instance, a wedding or graduation may be remembered in great detail because of the positive emotions associated with the event, while a routine day at work might fade into the background. Emotional experiences create stronger connections in the brain, making them more accessible when you try to remember them later. 32. People are more likely to take advice from someone they see as similar to themselves. The brain is more likely to trust and take advice from someone who appears similar to us in terms of background, experiences, or appearance. This is due to the brain's natural inclination to seek out social validation. When someone seems like us, we're more likely to believe they understand our perspective and motivations. This is why people often seek advice from friends or peers rather than experts, because they feel a sense of connection and trust with those who seem to share their experiences. This similarity bias can influence everything from personal relationships to professional decisions, as the brain tends to trust the opinions of those who feel familiar and relatable. 33. The brain uses stories to make sense of the world. Humans are natural storytellers, and the brain processes information more effectively when it's presented in narrative form. This is because the brain organizes experiences into stories, linking events together with a beginning, middle, and end. Storytelling makes complex information easier to understand, remember, and relate to. It also taps into emotional and social parts of the brain, making it more engaging. This is why movies, books, and even social media posts that tell stories are more compelling than dry facts or data. People are more likely to act on or remember information when it's presented as part of a story because it helps the brain relate to the content and find meaning. 34. Your brain creates its own version of reality based on past experiences. The brain doesn't perceive the world as it is. Instead, it creates a subjective version of reality based on past experiences, biases, and expectations. This phenomenon, known as perceptual filtering, means that two people can look at the same situation and interpret it in completely different ways. For example, someone who has had negative experiences with a particular group might feel threatened by their behaviour, while someone without those experiences might see the same actions as benign. The brain constantly adjusts how it processes sensory information, influenced by what you've seen, heard, or experienced in the past, which is why two people can perceive the same event so differently. 35. Your brain naturally seeks out patterns even when they don't exist. The brain is highly attuned to identifying patterns in the world around us. This ability is essential for survival, as recognizing patterns helps predict future events, such as the presence of danger or finding food. However, the brain is so good at finding patterns that it often creates connections where none exist. This is why people sometimes see faces in clouds, hear hidden messages in music, or believe in superstitions. The brain's pattern-seeking ability can lead to false positives, where the brain mistakenly believes it has identified a meaningful pattern, even when there's no actual connection. 36. People are more likely to engage in risky behaviour when they're feeling emotionally numb. When people experience emotional numbness or a sense of detachment, the brain is less likely to evaluate risks and consequences rationally. Emotional numbness can occur during periods of intense stress, depression, or burnout, and it leads to a reduction in self-regulation. This emotional disconnection can make individuals more susceptible to engaging in risky or harmful behaviours, such as substance use, reckless driving, or risky sexual behaviour, because they don't feel the emotional weight of those actions. The brain's reward system may also be involved, as individuals seek out external stimuli to feel something when they are disconnected from their emotions. The human mind is an endlessly fascinating puzzle, constantly shaping the way we interact with the world and with each other. While we like to think of ourselves as rational beings, the truth is that much of our behaviour is shaped by hidden psychological forces, many of which we don't even recognise. Here are some psychological facts that reveal the intricate workings of our brains, offering a deeper understanding of how we think, feel, and act. 1. The brain craves certainty and struggles with uncertainty. Your brain is wired to seek out certainty, primarily because uncertainty triggers anxiety. When faced with unfamiliar or ambiguous situations, the brain becomes stressed, leading to a sense of discomfort. This reaction stems from our evolutionary history. Uncertainty in the environment often meant danger, and knowing what to expect helped our ancestors survive. In modern life, uncertainty can come in many forms, whether it's about the future, relationships, or decisions at work, and the brain will often attempt to reduce this anxiety by seeking out clear answers. This explains why people may often resort to making quick, sometimes incorrect decisions to avoid the discomfort of not knowing what comes next. 2. Your brain is hardwired to see faces, even in random patterns. Humans have a unique ability to recognize faces, a skill that is so crucial for social interactions and survival that your brain has specialized areas dedicated to it. These areas are known as the fusiform face area, which allows you to recognize and process faces quickly and accurately. In fact, your brain is so attuned to faces that it can sometimes see faces even where they don't exist. This phenomenon is called pareidolia. For example, you might see a face in the clouds or in a random arrangement of objects. This is the brain's way of processing information that it finds most relevant. Faces are one of the first things we look for in the environment, as recognizing faces quickly can have life or death implications. 3. People tend to act more impulsively when they're tired. Sleep deprivation has a profound effect on your ability to make sound decisions. When you're tired, your brain's prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for rational thought, planning, and impulse control, becomes less effective. As a result, you're more likely to make hasty, emotional decisions without fully considering the consequences. This explains why people often act impulsively when they're sleep deprived, whether it's indulging in unhealthy food, skipping a workout, or making snap judgments in difficult situations. Chronic sleep deprivation can lead to long-term cognitive issues, affecting everything from memory to emotional regulation. 4. The brain processes negative emotions more intensely than positive ones. The negativity bias is a well-documented psychological phenomenon that explains why negative events tend to stick in our minds longer than positive ones. From an evolutionary standpoint, our brains are more sensitive to negative experiences because they often signal potential threats or danger, which required immediate attention and action. This bias helped early humans survive in hostile environments by prioritizing threats over rewards. Today, this tendency can lead to disproportionate emotional reactions to criticism, setbacks, or negative events. For instance, a single criticism can overshadow a dozen compliments, making it harder to focus on the positive aspects of life. 5. Your memory is influenced by the context in which you recall it. Memory isn't a perfect recording of events. It's often malleable and influenced by context, emotions, and the passage of time. When you recall a memory, your brain doesn't replay it like a video. It reconstructs it based on fragments of sensory information, emotions, and your current state of mind. This is why memories can change over time. New information, even subtle suggestions or social cues, can reshape the way you remember things. For example, if you're told by a friend that a particular event was fun, you might begin to remember it as more enjoyable than you initially did. This phenomenon also explains why two people can experience the same event and have completely different memories of it, influenced by their emotions, perceptions, and post-event discussions. 6. People's behaviour can be heavily influenced by the presence of others. Humans are naturally social creatures, and our behaviour is often shaped by those around us. This is especially true when we're in groups or in the presence of authority figures. Social influence can take many forms: conformity, peer pressure, and obedience. Research on group behaviour shows that people often change their actions to align with the group's norms, even if they don't fully agree with them. This is called conformity, and it happens because the brain seeks social acceptance and fears rejection. In situations where there's ambiguity or uncertainty, people are more likely to look to others for guidance, which often leads to groupthink, where the desire for harmony in a group leads to irrational or dysfunctional decision-making. 7. The brain thrives on novelty, but also needs routine. While the brain enjoys novel experiences because new things stimulate dopamine production, which is tied to motivation and pleasure, it also benefits from routines. In fact, when you develop a routine, the brain experiences reduced cognitive load because it doesn't have to work as hard to make decisions. Daily routines free up mental energy, allowing you to focus on more complex tasks. However, the brain can become complacent with too much routine, which can lead to a feeling of mental stagnation or boredom. This is why it's important to balance the benefits of routine with occasional novel experiences, which stimulate creativity, learning, and excitement. 8. People often underestimate the impact of their social circle on their behaviour. The people around you significantly shape your behaviour, attitudes, and even your health. Research shows that individuals are more likely to adopt the habits, attitudes, and lifestyles of their social circle than they realise. This is due to social contagion, where behaviours spread within a network of people, much like a virus. If you're surrounded by individuals who have healthy habits, you're more likely to adopt those habits yourself. Conversely, if your social circle engages in unhealthy behaviours, you're more likely to follow suit, even if you're not consciously aware of it. This underscores the importance of choosing your social environment wisely. It can be one of the most powerful influences on your health and happiness. 9. Your brain prefers easy-to-process information. Humans are cognitive misers. Our brains prefer to conserve mental energy whenever possible. This means that when we're faced with complex or ambiguous information, we tend to simplify it in order to process it more easily. For example, when you read a headline or see an advertisement, your brain automatically reduces the complexity of the information to fit your existing knowledge. This is why catchy slogans, visuals, and simple messages are so effective in advertising and communication. When information is easy to understand, the brain processes it more efficiently, and we're more likely to accept it without questioning it. 10. People are more likely to stick with a decision when they've invested time or effort into it. This psychological phenomenon is known as effort justification. When you invest significant time, energy, or money into something, your brain tends to place a higher value on it, even if the outcome is less than ideal. This is why people who spend hours building something or working on a project are more likely to see it as valuable or worthwhile, even if the result doesn't live up to expectations. Effort justification can be seen in everything from relationships to consumer behaviour to personal projects. The more effort you put into something, the more you tend to justify and rationalise its worth. 11. Your brain is biased toward visual information. Humans process visual stimuli significantly faster than auditory or textual information. In fact, studies have shown that the brain can process visual input in as little as 13 milliseconds. This rapid processing is one of the reasons why visual content, such as images, videos, or even body language, has a much greater impact than words alone. Visual stimuli are processed in the visual cortex, which is designed to quickly decode and interpret images. In contrast, verbal or textual information takes longer to process, as it involves more complex cognitive systems. This explains why people are often drawn to pictures or infographics over lengthy explanations or articles. 12. Stress can be contagious in a group setting. If one person in a group becomes stressed or anxious, it can quickly spread to others. This phenomenon, known as emotional contagion, happens because the brain is wired to pick up on emotional cues from those around us. The brain's mirror neurons allow us to empathize with others by mimicking their emotional state. This is why you can often sense when someone else is anxious or stressed, even if they haven't said anything. In a group setting, if one person expresses fear or frustration, it can trigger similar emotions in others, creating a collective sense of stress. This is why team leaders or group members with high emotional intelligence can play such an important role in managing group dynamics. 13. Your brain uses context to fill in the blanks of a conversation. When you're talking to someone, your brain doesn't process every word they say in isolation. Instead, it uses context, everything from body language to previous conversations, to fill in the gaps. This is why we can understand phrases like, "He's a little under the weather," even if we don't know the exact details. The brain takes cues from the broader context and infers meaning from past experiences and social norms. This helps us make sense of ambiguous or incomplete information in real-time conversations. However, it also means that misunderstandings can occur if the context is unclear or if the listener's expectations don't match the speaker's intent. Misinterpretations happen because our brains are constantly making assumptions about the meaning of words, even when they're not explicitly stated. 14. People tend to feel a sense of control when they have choices, but too many options can lead to anxiety. The brain likes having control over its environment, and having choices gives you the sense that you're in charge of your actions. However, too many options can actually paralyze decision-making, leading to what's called choice overload. When you're presented with a large number of choices, your brain has to work harder to evaluate each one, which can lead to confusion and dissatisfaction. This phenomenon is often seen in scenarios like shopping, choosing a restaurant, or even choosing a career path. When there are too many options, the brain becomes overwhelmed and can end up feeling anxious or dissatisfied, even after making a decision. Interestingly, people tend to be happier when they have just a few options to choose from, as it reduces the pressure and makes the decision-making process feel more manageable. 15. Your brain doesn't fully form until you're in your 20s. The brain is constantly developing, and it doesn't reach full maturity until a person is in their mid to late 20s. One of the last areas to fully develop is the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making, impulse control, and understanding the long-term consequences of actions. This is why teenagers and young adults often make decisions that seem impulsive or reckless to older generations. They simply lack the neurological development needed to fully understand the future impact of their actions. This period of development also helps explain why young adults are more likely to engage in risky behaviours, like experimenting with substances or making spontaneous decisions, while older individuals tend to think more carefully before acting. 16. People are more likely to remember things that are emotionally significant. The brain prioritizes emotionally charged experiences because they are deemed more important for survival. Events that trigger strong emotions, whether joy, fear, anger, or love, are stored more deeply in memory than neutral events. This is why you remember a wedding, a death, or a traumatic event with far greater detail than an average day. The brain releases dopamine, norepinephrine, and cortisol depending on the emotion, which help lock those memories in place. The heightened emotional state during significant events makes the memory vivid and harder to forget. This emotional connection also helps shape how we narrate our own life stories, often focusing more on the emotional peaks and valleys rather than the mundane moments in between. 17. People are more likely to conform when they feel insecure or uncertain. The need for social acceptance is deeply ingrained in human nature. When people feel unsure about how to behave in a particular social context, they often look to others for cues on how to act. This is known as social conformity. The brain tends to follow social norms when we feel uncertain about a situation, which is why peer pressure and groupthink can be so influential. For example, when you enter a new group or workplace, the brain subconsciously evaluates the behavior of others and adapts accordingly. This drive to conform helps us fit into social groups and avoid social rejection, but it can also lead to uncritical decision-making, especially when it comes to sensitive or controversial issues. 18. Your brain is constantly assessing risk, even in situations where you feel safe. Humans are always on the lookout for potential threats. It's part of our survival instinct. This constant risk assessment occurs even when we feel comfortable and safe. For example, while walking down the street, your brain is subconsciously scanning your environment for any signs of danger, like someone walking too close behind you or a suspicious-looking object. The brain's amygdala, which processes fear and potential threats, is always at work, even in neutral or relaxing situations. This is why certain sounds or situations, like hearing sirens or witnessing an argument, can suddenly spike your heart rate or make you feel uneasy. Your brain doesn't wait for you to consciously recognize the danger, it reacts instinctively. 19. People tend to overestimate their control over random events. The brain has a tendency to believe it can control events that are, in reality, random. This is called the illusion of control. It's why people throw salt over their shoulders after spilling some, or why gamblers believe that certain superstitions can affect their odds of winning. The brain craves control, and in an uncertain world, it looks for patterns that don't exist. This illusion helps the brain feel more secure and less anxious about uncontrollable factors. However, this overestimation can lead to poor decision-making, especially in situations involving chance. It's why people often engage in behaviours that they believe will influence outcomes when, in fact, those outcomes are largely random or outside their control. 20. Dopamine plays a crucial role in motivation, not just pleasure. Dopamine is widely known as the pleasure chemical, but it's also crucial in motivating you to pursue rewards. The brain releases dopamine not just when you receive a reward, but also when you expect a reward or when you're working toward a goal. It's why you feel motivated to complete tasks, pursue goals, and seek out new experiences. The anticipation of a reward triggers the release of dopamine, which creates feelings of excitement and motivation to keep moving forward. This is why people who set and work toward clear goals often feel a surge of energy and satisfaction as they approach those goals. Without dopamine, tasks would feel less rewarding and motivation would decrease. 21. People are more likely to act based on how something is framed. The way information is presented significantly influences how we perceive and respond to it. This is known as framing effect. The way a message is framed can change people's choices and decisions, even when the underlying facts are the same. For example, people tend to prefer a product labelled as having a 90% success rate over one with a 10% failure rate, even though both phrases describe the same outcome. The brain is highly sensitive to how things are framed, making us more susceptible to marketing tactics and persuasive messaging. This psychological principle is why advertisements, political speeches, and media outlets often frame issues in specific ways to influence public opinion or behaviour. 22. Your brain interprets silence as discomfort or a request to speak. Silence can be incredibly uncomfortable for many people, especially in social situations. The brain experiences silence as a gap in communication that needs to be filled, and this discomfort often leads people to speak out during awkward pauses. In conversation, if someone remains silent, your brain often interprets this as a prompt to continue or to offer your own thoughts. This is why people tend to over-explain things in group settings, or why there's a rush to fill pauses with words. Silence, while powerful and essential for processing thoughts, is often viewed as an opportunity for the brain to keep the flow of social interaction moving. 23. The brain is constantly rewiring itself based on experiences. Neuroplasticity is a remarkable property of the brain that allows it to adapt, learn, and change. Every time you learn something new, encounter a new experience, or practice a skill, your brain rewires itself to accommodate that new information. This means that, even as you age, the brain continues to form new connections and strengthen old ones, which is why cognitive exercises and learning are so beneficial. While the brain is highly adaptable, it can also reinforce bad habits if you're not conscious of the behaviours you're cultivating. The brain's ability to rewire itself means that we are never too old to learn or change. 24. The halo effect makes you judge someone based on one positive trait. The halo effect occurs when you assume that because someone is good at one thing, they must be good at other things as well. For example, if a person is attractive, you might assume they are also smart, friendly, or talented, even if there is no evidence to support this. The brain tends to overgeneralize traits based on first impressions or one standout feature. This cognitive bias is not limited to attractiveness. It can apply to other positive traits like competence or likability. While this can sometimes be helpful in making quick judgments, it also leads to unfair assumptions and the overlooking of important information. 25. Your environment can impact your mental and physical health more than you think. The environment you live in plays a significant role in your mental and physical well-being. Whether it's the design of your home, the people you interact with, or even the weather, your surroundings have a profound effect on your mood, productivity, and health. For example, studies have shown that spending time in nature can lower stress levels, improve focus, and boost overall mood. Similarly, a cluttered, chaotic environment can increase anxiety and decrease your ability to focus. The brain thrives in organized, calming environments, but it's constantly processing the sensory input it receives from the world around it, which influences everything from sleep patterns to energy levels. The human mind is full of mysteries, constantly shaping the way we experience the world. Despite our best efforts to understand ourselves, much of what drives our behavior is hidden deep within our minds. From how we process emotions to why we make the decisions we do, the brain is a fascinating organ that constantly influences our every action. Let's explore some psychological facts that reveal the hidden workings of the human mind. 1. Your brain is capable of rewiring itself throughout your life. Neuroplasticity is a term used to describe the brain's remarkable ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. This means that, no matter how old you are, your brain can adapt and change based on new experiences or learning. When you learn a new skill, such as playing an instrument or speaking a new language, your brain physically adjust to accommodate these changes, strengthening the pathways related to those abilities. This is why cognitive decline is not inevitable with age. Through continuous learning and mental stimulation, the brain can remain sharp and flexible. 2. The brain reacts faster to emotional stimuli than rational ones. The brain is wired to respond to emotional stimuli faster than it responds to logical reasoning. When you encounter a stressful or emotional situation, the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for processing emotions, activates almost instantly. In contrast, the prefrontal cortex, which handles logical thinking and decision-making, takes longer to process information. This evolutionary adaptation helped our ancestors react quickly to dangers, but it also means that we sometimes make impulsive, emotion-driven decisions before we've had time to think them through. 3. People tend to remember more vivid details when they are highly emotional. When people experience intense emotions, whether it's joy, anger, fear, or sadness, the brain tends to record those memories more vividly. This is due to the brain's release of dopamine and cortisol during emotional events, which help lock the memory in place. As a result, people often remember dramatic or emotional moments much more clearly than mundane, everyday occurrences. For example, a wedding day or the birth of a child is often remembered in great detail because of the intense emotions attached to those experiences, whereas a typical Tuesday might fade into the background. 4. The brain's memory isn't a perfect recording system. Contrary to popular belief, memories are not stored in the brain as perfect static recordings. Instead, memory is a constructive process where the brain pieces together bits of information from the past. Every time you recall a memory, the brain reconstructs it based on fragments of sensory data and emotions, often filling in gaps with what it thinks happened. This is why memories can change over time, and why two people who experience the same event might remember it differently. In some cases, new experiences or outside influences can distort memories, making them less reliable. 5. People tend to be more optimistic about their future than others are. The brain has a natural tendency to be overly optimistic about the future. This is known as the optimism bias, where people generally believe that good things are more likely to happen to them than to others. Studies have shown that individuals tend to underestimate the likelihood of negative events happening to them, while overestimating the likelihood of positive outcomes. This bias serves as a motivational tool, helping people take risks, pursue goals, and stay hopeful about their prospects. However, it can also lead to poor decision-making if it causes individuals to ignore potential risks or challenges. 6. People are more likely to conform in social situations when they feel uncertain. The brain is highly attuned to social dynamics and will often conform to group norms, especially in situations where it feels uncertain. This is known as normative social influence, where people change their behaviour to fit in with the group and avoid social rejection. The brain's need for social acceptance makes people more likely to follow the actions of others, even when they don't fully agree with them. This is why people might engage in certain behaviours, like smoking or drinking, because their peers are doing it, even if they don't believe it's a good idea. 7. The brain often jumps to conclusions based on first impressions. When you meet someone for the first time, your brain makes snap judgments about them based on a small amount of information. This is due to the brain's need to quickly assess new people in order to determine how to interact with them. The brain relies on stereotypes and heuristics, mental shortcuts, to make these decisions quickly. This means that people are often judged based on their appearance, mannerisms, or even the first few words they speak, and these initial judgments tend to stick, even if new information later contradicts them. This tendency to make quick judgments can lead to biases and misunderstandings, especially in high-stakes situations like job interviews or social gatherings. 8. People tend to be more generous when they feel appreciated. The brain responds positively to recognition and gratitude. When someone acknowledges your efforts or shows appreciation, the brain releases dopamine, the chemical responsible for feelings of pleasure and reward. This release of dopamine motivates people to continue engaging in positive behaviors. This is why people are more likely to offer help, share resources, or contribute to a cause when they feel appreciated and valued. In relationships, both personal and professional, expressing gratitude can strengthen connections and encourage future acts of kindness. 9. The brain can focus intensely on one task at a time, but multitasking is a myth. While people often believe they can handle multiple tasks at once, the brain is not capable of true multitasking. When you attempt to multitask, the brain switches back and forth between tasks, which reduces efficiency and increases the likelihood of errors. The brain is designed to focus on one task at a time, and dividing attention between multiple tasks can lead to mental fatigue and decreased performance. This is why people often feel exhausted after a day of multitasking. It's not because they've been working hard on multiple things, but because the brain is constantly shifting its focus between them. 10. People tend to focus more on what they don't have than on what they do. The brain is wired to focus on deficiencies or unmet needs. This is known as the scarcity mindset, where individuals place more value on what they lack than on what they possess. Whether it's material possessions, success, or relationships, people often feel dissatisfied with what they have and focus on the absence of something they desire. This mindset can lead to stress, envy, and feelings of inadequacy, as the brain constantly compares what's missing to what's present. Learning to appreciate the abundance in your life and practice gratitude can help rewire the brain to focus on what is already good. 11. Your brain can trap you in negative thought cycles. The brain is capable of creating negative feedback loops, where one negative thought leads to another and another, until you're stuck in a cycle of worry or rumination. These cycles are particularly common in situations involving anxiety, depression, or stress. When you experience a stressful situation, the brain reacts by heightening your alertness and focusing on potential threats. This reaction can sometimes escalate into overthinking, where your brain repeatedly revisits negative thoughts, amplifying feelings of helplessness or fear. Breaking out of these thought cycles requires consciously redirecting your attention, practicing mindfulness, or engaging in behaviors that interrupt the loop. 12. People tend to judge others based on how they speak. The brain makes rapid judgments about people based on their speech patterns, including tone, pitch, and accent. These judgments are influenced by social conditioning, as the brain is more likely to trust individuals whose speech is clear, confident, and familiar. The accent bias also plays a role. People are more likely to perceive someone with an accent they recognize as competent and trustworthy. Conversely, unfamiliar accents or speech patterns can trigger unconscious biases, leading to negative judgments. These biases can affect hiring decisions, social interactions, and even how people are treated in public spaces. 13. The brain tends to fill in gaps of knowledge with assumptions. When the brain encounters missing information or ambiguity, it doesn't leave the gap unfilled. Instead, the brain uses assumptions and expectations to complete the picture. For example, if you hear a partial sentence or see an incomplete image, your brain will often assume the rest based on what it knows or has experienced before. This process allows the brain to function efficiently by making quick decisions based on incomplete data, but it also means that people often misinterpret situations or overestimate their knowledge of a subject. This is one reason why people sometimes remember things incorrectly, because the brain has filled in gaps with assumptions, which can lead to distorted memories. 14. Your brain can get addicted to social media. The brain responds to social validation with a release of dopamine, which is why social media can be so addictive. Every like, comment, or share you receive on a post triggers a small reward response in the brain, reinforcing the desire to engage more with the platform. This dopamine feedback loop keeps people coming back for more, creating an addiction to the constant flow of social validation. Over time, the brain begins to crave these social interactions, making it harder to break free from the cycle of checking social media, even when it's not contributing to real social connection or well-being. 15. People are more likely to trust someone who mirrors their body language. The brain is incredibly sensitive to non-verbal cues, and it often uses body language to assess trustworthiness. When someone mirrors your movements, posture, or gestures, it signals to your brain that they are attuned to your feelings and emotions. This mirroring behavior helps build rapport and trust between people, as the brain interprets it as a sign of similarity and connection. The mirror neurons in the brain allow us to empathize with others by mimicking their behavior, creating a sense of mutual understanding. This is why you may feel more comfortable with someone who unconsciously mirrors your body language. It feels like they are on your wavelength. 16. People are more likely to make decisions based on emotions rather than logic. Despite believing ourselves to be rational beings, emotions often play a more significant role in decision-making than logical reasoning. The brain's limbic system, which is responsible for processing emotions, frequently overrides the prefrontal cortex, which handles logical thinking. This is why people often make impulsive decisions based on how they feel in the moment, even when they know those choices might not be the most rational. For example, if you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, you might make a rash decision, like snapping at someone or buying something you don't need, because the brain's emotional circuits are in control at that moment. 17. Your brain's default mode network becomes active when you're doing nothing. The default mode network, DMN, is a network of brain regions that is active when you're not focused on the outside world, like when you're daydreaming, relaxing, or not engaged in a specific task. While it might seem like your brain is inactive, the DMN is actually busy with important cognitive functions like self-reflection, creativity, and memory consolidation. The DMN is essential for making sense of your experiences, organizing memories, and even coming up with new ideas. This is why people often have their best ideas during moments of idleness, like while showering, walking, or staring out the window. Your brain is still working behind the scenes, making connections and insights. 18. People's behavior is influenced by the halo effect, judging a person based on one trait. The halo effect occurs when people form an overall impression of someone based on a single trait. For example, if someone is physically attractive, the brain often assumes they have other positive qualities as well, such as being intelligent, friendly, or successful. The brain tends to generalize this one positive characteristic to all aspects of the person, even if there's no evidence to support it. This effect can work in reverse too. If someone is perceived negatively in one way, such as being rude or messy, the brain might apply that judgment to their entire character, which is why we often make snap decisions about people based on limited information. 19. The brain is naturally inclined to resist change. The status quo bias is the brain's tendency to prefer things to stay the same, even when change could be beneficial. This resistance to change is rooted in the brain's need for predictability and stability. The brain sees change as an unknown, which can trigger anxiety and fear. The amygdala becomes active when confronted with uncertainty, and this triggers a negative emotional response that makes us more likely to stick with familiar habits or routines, even if they aren't optimal. This bias can prevent personal growth, adaptation, and innovation, making it difficult to embrace new ideas or change. 20. The brain processes faces faster than any other visual information. Humans have evolved to be highly sensitive to faces, which is crucial for social interaction and survival. The fusiform face area, FFA, in the brain is specifically dedicated to face recognition. Studies have shown that the brain can identify a face in as little as 170 milliseconds. This rapid recognition is essential for identifying friends, family, and potential threats. Faces convey important emotional information, and the brain is constantly scanning faces to assess others' emotions, intentions, and trustworthiness. This explains why faces are often the most attention-grabbing stimuli in an image, and why the brain can instantly detect familiar faces in a crowd. 21. The brain experiences cognitive dissonance when beliefs conflict with actions. Cognitive dissonance occurs when your actions and beliefs are in conflict, creating an uncomfortable psychological state. For example, if you believe that smoking is bad for your health but continue to smoke, your brain experiences a disconnect between your belief, smoking is harmful, and your behaviour, you're still smoking. To resolve this discomfort, the brain will either change your beliefs or justify your behaviour to reduce the conflict. This is why smokers might convince themselves that they deserve a cigarette after a long day or that life is short. The brain will go to great lengths to maintain internal harmony, even if it means distorting reality or changing one's beliefs. 22. People tend to overestimate their ability to control random events. The illusion of control is a psychological phenomenon where people believe they have more control over events than they actually do. This bias is particularly evident in situations involving luck or chance, such as gambling or choosing lottery numbers. People feel more in control when they can choose or influence the outcome, even if those outcomes are determined by chance. For example, someone might feel that they have a better chance of winning the lottery if they pick their own numbers rather than having them chosen randomly. The brain's tendency to seek patterns and exert control over random events can lead to irrational decision-making and risk-taking behaviours. 23. The brain's reward system is highly activated by unpredictability. The brain's dopamine system is particularly activated when we don't know what to expect. This is why gambling, games of chance, and even social media notifications can become so addictive. The unpredictability of outcomes, whether it's a jackpot, a like on a post, or a new message, creates an emotional rush because the brain craves the pleasure associated with unpredictable rewards. The uncertainty of when the next reward will come is a powerful motivator for continuing behaviours that lead to anticipation. This is why slot machines and social media platforms are designed with variable rewards, making them so difficult to resist. 24. People are more likely to forgive others when they see them as similar to themselves. Empathy is deeply rooted in the brain's social circuits, and it is easier to forgive someone when you can relate to them. When you see someone as similar to yourself, whether in personality, experiences, or circumstances, your brain is more likely to empathize with their actions, even if they have wronged you. This is because the brain activates mirror neurons that allow you to understand and feel what others are experiencing. In contrast, if you see someone as different or other, you may be less likely to forgive or empathize with their actions, even if they are asking for forgiveness. Our brain's natural tendency to seek connection and shared experiences can significantly influence how we approach forgiveness. 25. People are more likely to help others when they feel they are being watched. Humans are more likely to engage in helpful behaviour when they believe others are observing them. This is due to the brain's desire to maintain a positive social image. When we feel that someone is watching, we tend to behave in a way that reflects well on us, which includes helping others or adhering to social norms. This explains why people are more likely to offer assistance when they're in public settings or in the presence of authority figures. Social pressure and the desire for social validation drive us to act in ways that we believe will be positively evaluated by others. The brain's focus on social approval is a powerful motivator in shaping our actions, Everyone believes they understand why people act the way they do, but the truth is, the mind works in fascinating and mysterious ways. Every action, behaviour, and thought is influenced by complex psychological forces we often don't even notice. Let's dive into some psychological facts that reveal the hidden truths behind human behaviour. 1. Your brain is constantly predicting what's going to happen next. The human brain is like a prediction machine. It's constantly taking in information from the environment and using it to anticipate what's next. This process helps you act more efficiently and react faster to your surroundings. When you walk into a room and someone smiles at you, your brain doesn't just perceive that person's facial expression in the present, it's already making a prediction based on your past experiences. It predicts that this person is friendly or that something positive is about to happen, so you respond in kind. This predictive mechanism not only saves mental energy, but also allows us to anticipate threats. The brain's ability to predict based on past events can explain why you sometimes feel like you knew something was going to happen even before it did. It's your brain's way of making the world more understandable and navigable. 2. Your emotions can influence your memory. Memories are not as fixed as they may seem. While we like to think of memories as clear snapshots of past events, they are often influenced by our emotional states at the time of recall. The brain is highly emotional when it comes to storing memories. Events tied to intense emotions, whether positive or negative, tend to be remembered more vividly than neutral events. For instance, if you were extremely happy or sad during a particular moment, your brain is more likely to encode that event with greater detail. However, the emotions that come with the memory can distort it over time. The brain tends to fill in gaps with emotion-laden information, which can make certain memories feel more intense or more important than they might have originally been. This emotional imprint on memories can sometimes cause us to recall events with a sense of nostalgia or, conversely, with regret, even if the facts of the event don't align with how we feel about it now. 3. People tend to remember faces better than names. This is because the brain is specialized in facial recognition. There are specific neural regions, like the fusiform face area, that are dedicated to identifying faces. Over time, humans have evolved to be exceptionally good at distinguishing faces, which was crucial for social bonding and survival. This ability allows us to instantly recognize friends and acquaintances and assess emotional cues from others. However, when it comes to names, our brains rely on different systems for memory that require more effort and cognitive energy. As a result, people often struggle to recall names, especially when meeting a lot of new faces at once. This is why, even if you can recognize someone immediately, you might not recall their name right away. It's not that you're forgetful, it's just the way your brain processes visual information versus verbal information. 4. Your brain can trick you into believing something that isn't true. The brain is designed to make quick decisions based on available information. However, this means it can also fall prey to cognitive biases. For example, the brain has a tendency to believe things that fit its existing beliefs, even when there is no factual basis for those beliefs. The confirmation bias is a perfect example of this. This bias causes us to look for evidence that supports what we already think, ignoring or dismissing information that contradicts our views. This is why it's so difficult to change someone's mind once they've formed an opinion. They're not consciously resisting new information, but their brain is naturally filtering out anything that doesn't align with their preconceptions. This mechanism helped humans survive by making decisions quickly, but in today's complex world, it can sometimes lead to errors in judgment and reasoning. 5. People are more likely to follow the behaviour of others when they're uncertain. Humans are inherently social creatures, and we often look to others for guidance when we're unsure about how to behave. This is particularly true in ambiguous situations. The brain naturally seeks social validation and cues from others to make sense of uncertain circumstances. For example, if you're in an unfamiliar place, like a foreign country, and you don't know how to behave, you'll likely look to the locals to guide your actions. This instinct is known as social proof, and it helps individuals fit in with groups and avoid standing out. It's why trends and social movements can spread quickly. People look to others to determine what's acceptable or popular, even if they don't fully understand the rationale behind it. The brain uses social proof as a shortcut to help you make quick decisions without having to process every detail. 6. The halo effect causes us to make sweeping judgments based on first impressions. When we notice one positive trait in a person, whether it's their physical appearance, kindness, or confidence, we often assume they have other positive qualities as well. This is called the halo effect, and it can significantly distort our judgment. For instance, if someone is attractive, we might subconsciously assume they're also smart or friendly, even if we have no evidence to support that assumption. On the flip side, if someone has a negative first impression, we may think they're rude or incompetent, even if their actions don't entirely support that view. The halo effect shows how our brains tend to generalize based on limited information, and it can cause us to overlook other important factors that don't align with our initial impressions. 7. Fear can make your brain more focused. When faced with a threatening or dangerous situation, the brain releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These chemicals sharpen your focus, increase alertness, and prepare your body for fight or flight responses. This reaction, while essential for survival, can also make you more alert and focused on the task at hand. This is why some people perform better under pressure. Fear can block out distractions and make you concentrate intensely on the immediate threat. However, while fear can increase focus, chronic fear or anxiety can have the opposite effect. Over time, prolonged stress can actually impair cognitive function and reduce your ability to make clear decisions. 8. Your brain struggles to differentiate between a real and imagined experience. The power of the mind is extraordinary. When you vividly imagine an experience, whether it's a joyful moment, a stressful situation, or even something as mundane as eating your favorite food, your brain processes it as if it were actually happening. This phenomenon is why athletes use visualization techniques to improve performance. When they imagine performing well, the brain activates similar neural pathways to those used when actually performing the action. The same concept applies to negative experiences. Imagining a stressful event can create a real sense of anxiety and fear, which is why thoughts can sometimes feel like tangible experiences. The brain is not always aware of the difference between what's real and what's imagined, which can have a significant impact on our emotional and physical states. 9. People are more likely to act impulsively when they're tired. When you're tired, your brain doesn't process information as efficiently as it does when you're well rested. Sleep deprivation impairs decision-making by weakening the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational thinking and self-control. This makes it harder to weigh the consequences of your actions, leading to impulsive behavior. For example, when you're tired, you might make unhealthy food choices, skip a workout, or make a risky decision without considering the long-term effects. That's why experts recommend getting enough sleep, not just for physical health, but also for mental clarity and emotional regulation. 10. People are more likely to remember the beginning and the end of an experience. This phenomenon, known as the serial position effect, refers to the tendency to remember the first and last parts of an event more vividly than the middle. This bias has profound implications for everything from job interviews to speeches to relationships. If you start strong and finish well, people are more likely to remember the experience overall, even if the middle is forgettable. This is why your opening statement in a presentation is crucial. It sets the tone, and if you finish with something memorable, you'll leave a lasting impression. 11. Your brain tends to focus on negative information more than positive. This is known as negativity bias, a natural tendency for your brain to give more weight to negative experiences than positive ones. From an evolutionary standpoint, this bias helped our ancestors focus on threats or dangers in order to survive. As a result, negative experiences, whether it's a harsh comment or a stressful event, tend to stick in your memory longer than positive experiences. This bias affects your everyday life, making you more sensitive to criticism than compliments. It's why one negative comment can overshadow numerous positive ones, and why bad events often feel more significant than good ones. Overcoming this bias requires conscious effort to shift focus to the positive, but doing so can improve mental resilience and well-being. 12. Your brain can get addicted to stress. While we often think of addiction as being linked to substances like alcohol or drugs, the brain can also become addicted to stress. The rush of adrenaline and cortisol during stressful moments can feel addictive, making you crave that intensity even when it's harmful. People who thrive on high-pressure situations, or those who constantly face deadlines, may feel a sense of exhilaration from stress. Over time, this can lead to unhealthy patterns of behaviour, where the body becomes so used to being in a state of heightened stress that it becomes difficult to feel relaxed. Learning to manage stress and finding balance is crucial to breaking this cycle and protecting mental health. 13. The human brain can't focus on multiple tasks at once. This is a common misconception. While you may think you're multitasking, your brain is actually switching back and forth between tasks. This switching takes cognitive resources and reduces efficiency, which can lead to mistakes. When you're juggling multiple tasks, you're dividing your attention across them, and as a result, each task suffers in terms of quality and focus. Studies have shown that multitasking can even lower IQ temporarily and increase mental fatigue. Instead of multitasking, focusing on one thing at a time can increase productivity and improve performance across the board. The brain works best when it can dedicate full attention to one task rather than splitting its focus. 14. Your brain has a limited capacity for decision-making. The paradox of choice explains why having too many options can actually lead to stress and indecision. The brain has a finite amount of cognitive resources, and constantly making decisions drains these resources. As a result, when faced with too many choices, the brain becomes overwhelmed, leading to a decision-making paralysis or the decision to opt for the easiest option. This is why people often feel overwhelmed by long shopping lists or complicated tasks. They have to use a significant amount of cognitive energy to make decisions, which can lead to exhaustion and poor choices. To combat this, reducing the number of options or simplifying choices can enhance clarity and improve decision-making. 15. People tend to remember faces more than names. This is due to the specialized processing systems in the brain designed for face recognition. Our brains are equipped with areas specifically dedicated to recognizing faces, making it easier to spot a familiar face in a crowd, even after a long time. In contrast, names don't have the same specialized neural systems, and they require more cognitive effort to recall. While faces are processed in the fusiform face area, names are stored and retrieved from the brain's memory systems, which are not as specialized. This is why you can easily recognize a person you've met before, but remembering their name takes more time and effort. 16. People make snap judgments based on appearance. The brain is constantly making quick judgments about others, often within milliseconds of meeting someone. This phenomenon, known as thin slicing, is when the brain makes rapid decisions based on limited information, such as someone's facial expression, body language, or voice tone. These snap judgments often occur unconsciously and can shape the way we interact with people, sometimes even before we know anything about them. While this can be useful in making quick decisions in social situations, it can also lead to biases and misjudgments based on appearance alone, which is why it's important to challenge first impressions and give people a chance to reveal more about themselves. 17. Your brain responds more to negative feedback than positive feedback. This is another example of the brain's negativity bias, where negative experiences, such as criticism or failure, activate stronger emotional responses and are stored more vividly in memory. In contrast, positive feedback tends to be processed in a more neutral or less intense way. The reason for this is rooted in survival instincts. Negative feedback or criticism could represent a threat, so the brain prioritizes it in order to prevent future mistakes. This can be frustrating, as we tend to focus on our flaws or failures rather than our successes. To improve resilience, it's important to consciously focus on the positive and balance negative feedback with affirmations of success. 18. Humans are wired to be social creatures. The brain is hardwired to seek connection with others, as social bonding has played a critical role in human survival. The release of oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, helps foster trust, empathy, and attachment between individuals. This is why social interactions, whether they're with family, friends, or even strangers, can lift your mood and improve your mental health. The need for social connection is so strong that people who are isolated or lack close relationships often experience symptoms similar to physical pain. This underscores the importance of nurturing social bonds for both emotional and physical well-being. 19. The brain's default mode network is active when you're doing nothing. When your mind is at rest, like during daydreaming or idle moments, the brain's default mode network, DMN, is activated. This network is involved in processes like mind-wandering, self-reflection, and social cognition. While the DMN is often associated with idle moments, it's actually important for problem-solving and creative thinking. Many people have moments of insight or come up with their best ideas when they're not focused on anything specific. This is why sometimes the best ideas come to you when you're doing something mundane, like walking or taking a shower. Your brain is allowing itself to make connections that it doesn't have the mental space for when it's focused on tasks. 20. People can pick up on micro-expressions that reveal hidden emotions. Micro-expressions are tiny, involuntary facial expressions that occur within a fraction of a second. These expressions can reveal hidden emotions, such as anger, fear, or disgust, even when someone is trying to hide them. The human brain is highly attuned to these subtle cues, often recognizing them without conscious awareness. This is why you can sometimes sense when someone is lying or feeling uncomfortable, even if they're trying to appear calm or composed. Being able to read these micro-expressions gives humans an evolutionary advantage, allowing us to detect potential threats or deception in social situations. 21. Your brain can trick you into thinking something is familiar. This is known as the familiarity heuristic, and it happens when you perceive something or someone as familiar simply because it resembles something you've encountered before. The brain tends to make these quick judgments to conserve energy and avoid overthinking. However, this can also lead to false memories or mistaken recognition. For example, you might feel that someone is familiar because their face or voice reminds you of a friend or family member, even though you've never met them. The brain's reliance on familiarity can be helpful for quick decision-making, but it can also lead to misidentifications or biases. 22. Your brain is constantly judging the emotions of others. Humans are exceptional at reading other people's emotions, even when they don't speak a word. The brain uses both conscious and subconscious processes to decode facial expressions, body language, and vocal tones to determine how someone is feeling. This ability to quickly assess others' emotional states is essential for social interactions, as it helps you respond appropriately in different situations. The mirror neurons in your brain allow you to feel empathy and react to another person's emotional state almost instantly, which is why you can often feel someone's pain or joy just by observing them. 23. Stress can actually improve your performance in the short term. Stress isn't always harmful. In small doses, stress can sharpen your focus and enhance your performance, especially in high-stakes situations. This is because stress activates the fight-or-flight response, releasing adrenaline and cortisol that heighten your alertness, increase your heart rate, and prepare your body for action. This heightened state of arousal can help you perform well during presentations, exams, or sports events. However, chronic stress can have detrimental effects on the brain, leading to burnout, anxiety, and physical health issues. It's all about balance. Stress can be useful for motivation, but long-term exposure can overwhelm the system. 24. The brain needs downtime to function optimally. While it may seem counterintuitive, the brain is not built for constant work or stimulation. Just like the body, the brain needs rest and recovery to function properly. Studies show that taking breaks, especially in the form of naps, can significantly improve focus, memory, and learning. The brain uses downtime to consolidate memories and integrate information. Without rest, cognitive function diminishes and productivity decreases. This is why taking short breaks throughout the day and getting adequate sleep is crucial for maintaining mental sharpness and overall brain health. 25. People tend to seek social validation from others. Humans have an innate desire to be liked and accepted by others, which is why we often seek validation in the form of compliments, likes on social media, or approval from peers. The brain's dopamine system rewards us when we receive positive feedback, which reinforces the desire for social acceptance. This need for validation is so strong that it can influence decisions, behaviours, and self-worth. While it's normal to want approval, too much reliance on external validation can lead to anxiety and insecurity. True self-esteem comes from internal validation, not just from what others think of you.